Hey friends, we're off here again with the Louisville ProActivist Report. Thanks for joining us today. I have a very, very special guest with me. I have Charles Booker, who is running for U.S. Senate. He's running for the position that Mitch McConnell currently has. And with any luck and some hard work, we're going to make sure that Charles has that seat soon. So thanks for joining me today, Charles. How are you?
Thank you, brother. I'm doing well considering all things, man. I'm hanging tough. Nearly lost my voice pretty much every day over the past week, but my spirits are lifted and I'm ready to keep fighting.
And let me just say from the jump, for those that aren't that local, we don't have a lot of politicians fighting for us currently with this Breonna Taylor situation, and Charles is out there every day, fighting for us. I just don't see that from other elected officials. So we know we have a fighter on our hands, and this is why I wanted to bring Charles on the show today, as he tries to move from the representatives to the Senate. So you're currently elected official in the representatives. So how do you think that prepares you for this next step, moving up to Senate?
I think it has really helped to sharpen my ability to build coalitions. It's given me a very important perspective on what it means to deal with electoral politics in Kentucky. And Mitch McConnell controls a lot of what happens at the state level. And so being able to see how he influences legislation, having to engage and push on his office and other federal offices in my role, as I think it's really given me the wherewithal to leverage all the experience I already had in working in community and working in the local and federal government. So I've worked at every level of public service, trying to understand how this stuff works and how it can work better for regular people. And I think this role as an elected official for Kentucky, and I've really just maximized it. So I've used it very intentionally to go across Kentucky, of course, the past couple of years before the pandemic, really trying to break barriers down and be an advocate for people all over the Commonwealth, because for me, that's a part of organizing. You build relationships, you build coalitions, you get that message and that platform out and mobilize folks. You don't operate in a silo. And Louisville's in a bucket, and then it's the rest of the Commonwealth. And I even tell folks, like, you have the Louisville rest of the state dynamic, but then you have the west end of Louisville, which has much more in common with Appalachia than it does the rest of Louisville in a lot of ways. And then I think one of the big things is I've been able to pass legislation. I'm running for a legislative office. And office has a lot of power to put forward good legislation, and certainly not block good legislation, which Mitch McConnell does. And having passed bills with our own mini Donald Trump, which Matt Bevin was exactly that, just let me know that it really is possible. I got a couple bills passed in my first term, which doesn't happen often, especially if you're a Democrat, with Republicans having a supermajority. And the way I was able to do it was build relationships. When you speak the truth, people respect you. Even if they don't agree with you on everything, they know where you're coming from. You're not BSing them. And so I'm going to take all of that to Washington so we can get some stuff done. And ultimately for me is we got to end poverty. We got to bust through the structural inequity so that things can be better for Kentuckians.
And I like that you bring up legislation. Words are nice. We like to hear that stuff, but if there's no legislation behind it, no actual fixes, then they're just words.
You got to do the work, and that's what I've been committed to, man. Like we don't have time for platitudes. We don't have time for folks that will tell us what the polls say that we want to hear, or pander to us. And I've been pushing back on that really aggressively because I'm sick of it, man. Especially if you live in a community where you don't have a lot of resources, it's not a lot of natural political power because they ignore us, which is a lot of people in Kentucky. Folks only show up when it's time to get your vote,
right?
Tell you whatever they think you need to hear, and then they disappear on you. And meanwhile, we die while that happens. So now I've put the work in because I know that's what we need, and I'll do that in Washington.
Yeah, some of these guys, you forget they're in office until you get a re-election flyer in your mailbox.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this guy again, huh?
Yeah.
I want to get into the meat of your policies, but before we do that, just talk about, your relationship to the state, how you grew up here,
yeah,
and kind of lead into, when you very first got into politics, what inspired you? Because my show is a lot about inspiration, not only from my guests and what inspires them, but hopefully it leads to inspiring somebody watching this to run for office or work in activism or something. So just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to this point you are today.
Yeah, well, thank you for using this platform, because that is really why I show up in these spaces. I don't come from politics at all. I don't come from money. Like, both my parents dropped out of high school, and we've been broke all my life, and I've worked my way through college and law school, and now I got a whole hell of a lot of student debt that I don't think I'll ever pay off. My wife and I, and my story, I lean into my story really because of your point. We need more people, no matter where you come from, how much money you have, what you look like, what pronoun you use, or whether you're walking or using a wheelchair. We need everybody to know that our voices matter, and we deserve a government that is accountable to our humanity and to our lives because we pay for it. And it's been inspired for me just growing up in the struggle, seeing my mom work multiple jobs just so we could barely keep the lights on, and a lot of times we did not keep the lights on, and just the trauma of going to school, knowing I'm gonna come home, it's gonna be dark, water wouldn't be on. There were times we were homeless. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I spoke on the House floor about the moments when I'd run out and we didn't have enough money to get any more, that I could see my mom just break down. She's my superhero, man. Like, she's strongest person I know. And so I would see in those moments where she was essentially like, I can't keep you alive, CJ. That's my nickname, Charles Jr. And all these experiences, I really lean into them because we don't really have a lot of politicians that talk from a standpoint of personal connectedness and speak with moral clarity and, cut through the BS and talk about real stuff that Kentuckians are facing. And so that inspired me to get into public service. I live in, a lot of people don't know this, what has been the poorest zip code in Kentucky is actually not in Appalachia. It's in the West End, and it's where I live at. And where unemployment's been close to 30% for years. People are getting arrested and thrown to the ground because poverty is criminalized, and we have a militarized law enforcement that, in a lot of cases, sees people that look like me or don't have a lot of resources as a problem, a nuisance, or a deadly weapon before being a human being. And all of that is just another day in the life, man. That's just my route to Frankfurt. Yeah. And I got into public service because I just wanted to understand, how does this stuff work? Y'all talking about us, but we're not in the room. You're talking about issues Kentuckians face as if they're like just numbers on a piece of paper, not real lives. And I just worked my way in. I call myself a good troublemaker. Like, I'm trying to get in there and shake it up, man. I almost cuss. That's what we got to do, man. The status quo has to go. And anyone that's going to pacify it or slow walk it and act like it's okay is ignoring a whole lot of Kentuckians that are really hanging on by a thread or falling off the cliff as we speak. So my biggest inspiration for actually running, because I've been working in government, I never thought I'd run for office, man. It was inspired by my daughter, Preston. So I have two girls, Caitlin and Preston. Caitlin's my 6th grader, Preston is my preschooler. And when Preston was coming into the world, I had worked in local, state, and federal government. I saw what was going on. I saw people making decisions like, why would you do that? If you would have took this stand, you could have helped people. And these are people I look up to. And I just had this realization, like, what am I bringing Preston into the world to? My daughter Caitlin's here, who saved my life, and I've been doing all this work, and now, 8 years later, Preston's coming, and there's not a whole lot different. And I just felt like I had to do something. And what really lit the fire after just feeling like, okay, I'm gonna run. My cousin TJ was murdered on Easter Sunday in 2016. And actually every year since, I've had a relative that's been murdered. And I just felt like if I don't stand, who's gonna speak for them? And so here I am, and I'm a regular guy. Like I said, I don't come from a dynasty of power, or I certainly don't look like the people in power, but I know we belong there. So here I am.
I like that, you know, and the people in power should be the people. So
damn right. I mean, absolutely, man.
So speaking of which, now you're running for a seat. You're up against Big Money Mitch. He's got a lot of money. He's going to have a lot of advertising. At the same time, you also have a lot of money and a lot of advertising behind Amy McGrath in your own primary. So I know you're doing things a little bit differently. You're running it more grassroots. Talk about the decision to go grassroots, and how do you think you can keep up with that?
Yeah. Well, it really wasn't a decision. That's what I know. You know, I'm really connected to our history. My granddad fought for desegregation here in Louisville, and just understanding the only way you really shift things is by inspiring and mobilizing people. Like, just money can't replace that. And it doesn't really matter how much money you have if you don't have a vision, and you can't inspire people to believe their voice matters or anything can be different, especially in Kentucky, which has been one of the most disenfranchised states in the country. And a lot of it is my conviction and faith too, man. I just know that if we come together and we believe and we push for a change, of course we can win it. And so when people say, how can you beat Mitch McConnell? First of all, we absolutely will beat Mitch McConnell. He doesn't stand a chance, matter of fact. And I can speak with such confidence because I know what we can do. And you know, I am running against this big money model, and I think it's important that we beat it in the primary and the general, because it's not partisan. Like this model of ignoring people, playing to the corporate elites, you know, dismissing structural racism and gross inequity, and you know, just playing the political game of football to see who can score the most points is not just in any one party. Certainly here in the United States. And so we're doing it different by going to the places that get ignored. We've created a campaign that says that you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be experienced. If you're alive and you care about this Commonwealth, you are part of this campaign, and we will give you everything you need to do whatever you want to do wherever you are. And because of that, it's made it easier for people to get involved and to feel like, okay, I'll try. Because a lot of people don't even deal with politics. We're live and in action, so if someone comes in, it's okay. But you know, a lot of people don't even deal with politics because they're like, well, what the hell's the point? That ain't for me. I'm trying to survive. And we've been busting that up. And because of that, even though our average contribution stays in like the low 20s, we've been able to raise enough money to do digital, to go up on cable. And I think Senator Sanders' campaign helped to show that you don't need big donors and big corporations to raise the resources to run a very effective campaign. So we're doing it, man, and we got a real shot to win, and we will.
Nice. And you know, I've heard me say it before. I'll say it every time I bring a candidate on. You can tell who that candidate's working for by who donates to them. So if you have a grassroots candidate that gets elected, they work for you. If they're not grassroots and they're taking big money, that's who they work for. They can say what they want to say, and they can be in whichever party they're in, but they're not working for you. So it's all about the policy, and it's all about the grassroots donations. So that's awesome to hear, man. Definitely. So let's and just to kind of double down on that, on you working for us, I know you've taken some pledges. Yeah. Can you talk about those real quick?
Yeah. I've signed a few pledges, and I'm open to signing more. The first one I immediately did was no fossil fuel. I had actually pledged to that before becoming a candidate.
That was at the climate march, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah. And you know, in my role as a state rep, I know how critical it is, because Kentucky is like ground zero for all the ills of the fossil fuel industry, and how the economy has changed, and communities across the Commonwealth have been left behind, or left with dirty water, left with health issues, and then are struggling to get health care. And so, like, that was just one of the first things that's foundational to me. So I've signed the no fossil fuel pledge, and then I also signed a pledge to not take money from any corporate PACs. We've had politicians for sale for too long, and Mitch McConnell is case in point. He has sold us out every step of the way. You follow a bill, you see where he blocked it, then you will see who paid him to do it. And then I also signed a pledge to not accept money from big developers in real estate. I believe housing is a human right, and as we push for sustainable housing, which is also part of the Green New Deal, but also just the fact that so many people are struggling to pay rent, which is why I came out to say we need to cancel rent during this pandemic, but we also need caps generally. So that was really important to me. I'm trying to make sure I keep our rent paid now, and I know a lot of y'all are feeling that. Then I also signed the Humanity Forward Pledge, and that is connected to my conviction for universal basic income and ending poverty by investing directly in people and providing cash payments to folks so that your livelihood is not defined by your hourly wage because they're too low to begin with. And two, we do so much for this economy, for this Commonwealth, this country, that we never get paid for. One example I'll give is if you have a cell phone, which we're recording on, and you go on social media, your data, where you're at, what you like to look up, the demographic information that you have gets monetized, and corporations get, especially, you see how fossil fuel is just, Facebook. You could tell that I have a problem with fossil fuel industry, but Facebook has exploded, and they're making all these profits, and it's because they're able to take our information, refine and market products to us, sell our information, and we don't get paid anything for that. And so just getting an equity stake in the economy that we are responsible for is justice, man. So those are some of the pledges, and if y'all have any suggestions on any others, I'm down. I just want to make the statement clear that I'm for people, no time for the political BS.
Well, it's a whole nother show. I just want to say that the new oil is data. So, you have basically the data barons nowadays. We used to have the oil barons. That's a whole nother show. We can do that another day. But let's dig into the meat of your campaign, which is the policy. Mm-hmm. And I know a big one for you is Medicare for All. So tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I see health in a holistic way. It's been a lot of the work that I've done, but also just knowing that so many communities deal with trauma. There's so many health disparities, and like I said, if you look at most measurable indices that would show a good quality of life, like Kentucky is at the bottom and damn near all of them. Mm-hmm. And I see as a value statement, if we want to end poverty is a policy choice, we need to make sure people have access to quality care. Because if you're healthy, you can stay employed, you can advance your education, you can launch a business because you're healthy enough to even consider that stuff, and I use my personal story of, being a type 1 diabetic and nearly dying really just because I couldn't afford my insulin. Like it wasn't because I wasn't managing it or checking my levels or eating right. We just ran out of money. And, I have 2 girls and my bosses that if I got to take care of them, even if it means I can't afford my insulin, what I'm going to do. And a lot of Kentuckians know that story. Like, I don't care what your party is. Like, if it's not you, somebody that has had that type of struggle. And so, I just proudly support Medicare for All because we need to get the profit model out of the health system, which essentially says that they're designed for more people to be sick and to need care as opposed to helping more people get healthy. We put like $500 billion annually into administrative costs and not making people healthy. So that is central to my campaign, and I've been endorsed by Demand Universal Health Care. And I was proud of a lot of the platform that Senator Sanders led, as well as some others, but Senator Sanders mostly leaned into it, which is why a lot of those folks are helping my campaign now, because we're going to go to Washington and win it.
Nice. So moving on from the health of the people to the health of the planet that we live on, talk about a Green New Deal.
So Green New Deal was, even before I came out publicly for Medicare for All, which was actually years ago. So I worked for Congressman Yarmouth in 2010 and 12, and they were pushing for the expansion of the Affordable Care Act. I'm actually giving a little bit more context on Medicare for All. The reason I wanted to work with him then was because he was one of the few that was actually pushing to expand healthcare, and I was like, this is the step. So, I've been working on that, but at the same time, environmental issues, the ills of climate crisis, which it is indeed a crisis, like I just grew up knowing about it. And just and there's a lot of areas see these similarities, but like in the West End, where there's so much concentrated injustice, and then when you think about racism at an environmental level, where you got brownfields, you got this big heat island where everybody's cooking, the water is contaminated in the waterways, and so any of the ponds or any waterway in our area is contaminated, so you can't fish there. And then you have a place like Rubbertown that's putting toxic chemicals in the air, let alone from the fact that we don't have leadership at the state and federal level that is pushing to make sure our water is clean, to make sure that our air is not toxic. So we have high asthma rates, high cancer rates. And so that is why I came out and supported the Green New Deal, and Sunrise Movement endorsed me in my exploratory because they knew how I showed up. I mean, I've been in the streets marching for this stuff, trying to, make sure we put more measures in place to track the emissions from these plants. And then this cuts across Kentucky, man. I stood on the tracks with some miners in Harlan County, and the coal industry is declining. In a lot of respects, it's gone. Yeah. And folks are being left high and dry and on the tracks, literally. And I stood with some miners, one, because I know what that's about, being abandoned, seeing your livelihood taken away. We've had industries leave our community and never come back. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I heard from them, one, they talked to me about their health issues. They talked to me about how the water there, if they have it at all, because utility costs are high, it could be orange or brown, irritate their skin, not safe for their children to drink. But then also I heard about the reality that they would love to do something else. Like they would love to go into solar. Not to disrespect the work that they had put in, but just because they want more opportunity and they want to be healthy, right, and they want more money to circulate in their community and more infrastructure. And so a Green New Deal is our way of setting a bold, broad vision that expands the conversation about the climate crisis and brings it down to every aspect of our lives. The cars we drive, the roof over our head, the economy that we deal with, the wages that we have, our access to quality health care. All of this is woven into our environment. And so I actually told folks at Sunrise, and I mentioned it at the climate strike, that we need a Kentucky New Deal. And what that means for me, any type of bold vision has to be filtered through the lens of equity. And it has to be led by the people most affected. So a Kentucky New Deal is my way of saying Kentucky needs to lead the way. We need to make sure that we implement this and it's not done to us, because we can't wait. It's happening, and we won't have much of a planet left if we sit around. So I'm proud to take that stand. Kentucky Climate Strike, Youth Climate Strike has endorsed me as well, and we're going to go to Washington and raise some hell to win this, because it's for our very future, man.
I like that point you made with the Kentucky New Deal, because we are in a position to lead that change, because we are one of the states that we're one of the biggest coal states.
Yeah.
We know it's not coming back no matter what they say. So we have to transition to something. There has to be some kind of jobs there, and there's just not right now. So this would do it with the manufacturing of solar or wind or however they could get into that. So
yeah, we got a lot of old infrastructure. I mean, there are jobs in, upgrading them, making them sustainable. We have the Ford plant here. We do a lot in automobiles, and a lot of these companies have already been going down that path. Let's put more federal resources into helping them speed it up. We could lead the way, man, and we need to. Definitely.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I'm glad to see this next policy proposal of yours, because this is something that a year ago nobody was really talking about. But that's UBI, Universal Basic Income.
Yeah.
So this, for those that don't know what that is, tell us what UBI is and why you support it and how you'd like to see it implemented.
So Universal Basic Income, or as Dr. King put it, guaranteed annual income, is essentially a way of getting money directly to people on a consistent basis, simply because they are human beings and they deserve a certain quality of life because of their humanity. It is not tied to employment. It's not means tested, which means if you are alive and you're breathing, you get this resource. And it's not a handout. It really is a matter of saying that you go outside, you see trash on the ground, you pick it up. You see someone that is hurting, you help them out. You stay at home, you take care of a loved one. We do so much to make sure our community can continue to function that never gets accounted for. And meanwhile, the wealth gap is growing and growing and growing. Folks are dealing with poverty that is generational. And when we know that, again, policy is a poverty choice that's rooted in racism, this is one of the ways we get at the heart of structural racism. We break down barriers to where you have the financial freedom to decide, okay, I'm going to take this training, or I'm going to start a business, or I'm going to invest. Stuff that when you're from where I'm from, you just never even think about. It's not even on the radar because you just trying to make it to the next day. And I've been fighting for this for years, man. I actually was working with some local leaders to get a pilot off the ground. Mayor Michael Tubbs out of Stockton, California, had got a pilot off the ground with philanthropic dollars. And so before I was in office, I was working with some council folks and some folks in the philanthropic community, business community, to try to put this together. And there's interest on the ground, and honestly, there's interest nationally. I give Andrew Yang a lot of credit for putting it on the stage at the presidential level. But what it did was help shine a light for folks that have been fighting for it for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I made it a central part of my campaign, even though some folks were like, don't do that in Kentucky. It's like, look, I'm listening to the people of Kentucky. I'm not doing this the regular way, because that loses anyway. What the hell's the point in that? And I made it a part of my campaign because I wanted to be clear. We got to end poverty. We got to close the loop. And we have a lot of safety net programs that help make sure I'm even here today. You know, I was on food stamps most of my life into adulthood. And universal basic income is not a replacement for that, in my opinion. It is a way to say that we're going to invest in people that are at their wits' end, because we don't want the bottom to fall out. But we're also going to cut into this wealth gap and the fact of exploitation and extraction that has been so great. And we're going to put equity back into people so that they have a stake. It's almost like a dividend. And so I think we got a real big opportunity. The pandemic's helped make that clear. Like, there's a bipartisan coalition now of folks saying, yeah, people need direct cash payments. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you for showing up. So now I don't sound like I'm radical. This is good public policy now. So I'm excited to get Mitch McConnell out of there so we can push it.
Yeah, things would be so much different if we had UBI during the pandemic. I mean, you can look at across the country the strikes at the different capitals where people were upset. And they had reason to be upset. Basically, their jobs were taken away, their ability to earn money was taken away, and yet the bills are still due.
Yeah.
So the anger is real and deserved. But if we would have had a UBI, you wouldn't have seen these people striking, because they'd have still been able to go to the groceries, pay the bills, so on and so forth. So yeah, you're totally right about that. So this next one's, given the current state of things, is a big topic, and that's criminal justice reform. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that play out all over the country right now, from Minnesota to right here. And you know, you've been out in public, as we said earlier, pretty much all week. I know I've marched this week myself, so I've been there. So yeah, just give us your thoughts. I guess start with your feelings on Breonna Taylor and everything that's happened, and then kind of lead into, you know, how you want to change criminal justice. Yeah.
So as far as Breonna Taylor, so her family is close to my family. And when I heard the facts continue to come out about what happened to her, it was really devastating, man. She was really good friends with my cousin TJ that I mentioned, and I dealt with the trauma of losing her, but also feeling like I lost TJ over again. And it's been really hard for me. I think the pain that you're seeing in the streets is a whole community of people grieving and really just outcrying from years of injustices that have never been rectified or reconciled. And then also just structural racism, institutional racism that people are just fed up with. And it's not, I think it's because we're so interconnected now more than we have been, like during like the civil rights movement, for instance, it's easier for people from all different backgrounds to see it. Like which is why you're seeing cities all over Kentucky, even in Corbin, you know, it's like places that are like 90% white are protesting. And what I was explaining is that if you understand our common humanity, our bonds to one another, that we're family, if you're hurting, I'm hurting. And if somebody is criminalizing, killing your black and brown sister or brother, that's hurting you too. And as family, we gotta protect one another. And I think that's what you're seeing in the streets. Like, these aren't protests. It's like, it's an uprising.
Like it's a rebellion.
This is an absolute dynamic where we're changing the system. We're not just being loud and then we're gonna go home once we got it out. No, we want change and we're never going back. And you're seeing it all over the country. And as tough as it is, I'm inspired by it. And I think the conversation on criminal justice reform really flows in and out of this dynamic with Breonna Taylor and Mr. McAtee, barbecue man, where, like I said, we criminalize poverty. And if we create these industrial complexes that become more about sustaining them than actually doing the work that we believe they should do. So we have a military industrial complex, same with our prisons. And I believe the same is true within our law enforcement, where every year their budgets grow and grow and grow. They're turning more into military forces. The whole idea of protect and serve has just been forgotten a long time ago, if it was ever there. And what we see now is a dynamic where if law enforcement encounters me, even as an elected official, I'm prepared for them to hurt me before they realize who I am. And my mom still has to talk with me. I'm 35 and I'm getting on the road to go to the state capitol as a state legislator, and my mom will still have to talk with me, man. And so my push for criminal justice reform is connected to the economy. It's connected to health and well-being. So the whole process, how law enforcement engages with people, which we absolutely need to defund. We need to completely reimagine what it means to have public safety, because more police does not mean safer communities at all. If anything, it's counter, especially if you're a poorer community. So you start from then, the encounter. If someone goes into the system in any respect, how is their humanity being treated? How are we addressing the traumas? How are we actually getting to restoring and healing folks and not breaking them down and creating a pathway of recidivism? And then as they transition back out, how are we making sure they're actually getting back up on their feet, that they have the supports, healthcare, like I said, wrap around to deal with racial and mental trauma of going into an environment that, in many ways I can't even fathom what it puts someone through just psychologically, mentally. And then make sure they have their agency. Kentucky's one of the most disenfranchised states because we're just one of the couple that permanently ban folks from voting if they have a felony, if they're convicted of a felony. My uncle made a mistake 30 years ago, just got his right to vote back this year with that executive order that Governor Beshear passed, which was based in large measure off of my bill, which was House Bill 6. It doesn't go as far. It has exceptions, but it was a great step forward to restore voting rights for over 150,000 Kentuckians. And so I've also pushed for the end of cash bail. I've filed led legislation to have automatic expungement of records. We need to legalize cannabis. I filed a bill to completely legalize it and invest in marginalized communities, as well as decriminalize it as we make those steps forward. I was a co-sponsor on medicinal cannabis. Like, I've been doing this work because I know at the end of the day, not only is it the right thing to do for human beings, but it will allow more people to be gainfully employed, to be investors and to be innovators and creators, and Kentucky will thrive. So that's central for me, and I'm proud to carry that to Washington because Mitch McConnell sees none of this. And anybody that would say they're a pro-Trump Democrat doesn't get anything about this. And and William Barr is up there. Of course, he's ripping up the Constitution as we speak, but then he's saying, well, there's no racial bias in our justice system. Anybody that says that is unfit. We've been through too much.
Right.
And so that's why I'm fighting.
Nice. So from criminal justice reform to immigration reform, what are your plans for that?
Yeah, I worked in D.C. during law school in around 2008, 2009, during the height for immigration reform, and I got to see the conversations back and forth. And I think everybody, at least in rhetoric, will say we need a pathway to citizenship. I firmly believe that, and no person is illegal. And I think we've taken an approach that has looked to criminalize and marginalize and put a population of people into like another tier where they're working incredibly low wage jobs, they're not getting health care, they're getting their civil rights discriminated and harmed at every step of the way, and they never get a shot to do what we're just trying to do. Advance, take care of our families. So I've said we need to codify DACA and DAPA, deferred action for childhood arrivals, and DAPA, and as well as TPS, so temporary protective status. We need to codify these measures and actually put a pathway to citizenship in place. And as far as like kids in cages, I mean, come on. I would want to file legislation to make that a criminal act, just period. And I do believe that we have to cut through the politics on this type of issue. There was a bill in the state legislature that was essentially the Family Separation Deportation Act, and it was Senate Bill 1. Mm-hmm. So it was their priority legislation to harm communities that are already just getting left out of any opportunity to live a gainful life. And I stood up and fought against that. And I'm glad that bill didn't make it through because this is, again, how do we strengthen our economy? How do we win our future? How do we make sure everyone is safe? You do that by protecting people and by honoring people no matter where they come from as human beings, man. I almost cussed. So that's really central to my platform, which is why so many people are supporting our campaign from all different nationalities, folks that come with various different languages, and we're working through our website to make it like accessible to folks with that speak different languages. And I want to be held accountable to every single Kentuckian, every single person in this country, no matter where they come from or what their religion or faith is.
First of all, on this platform, if you need to cuss, you can cuss.
All right, thanks for, because I let it fly anywhere. So
we don't worry about the FCC over here. So just real quick, I know we've got a few more topics to go. Everything good on time still?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, all right. So one of my everybody that knows me knows I have two big issues I work on policy for. One of those is election integrity, and a big aspect of that is voting rights, and I know you have some plans for that. So tell me about that.
Yeah, and I'd mentioned restoration. That's a big deal for me for a lot of reasons. I mentioned my personal connection to that. A lot of Kentuckians are disenfranchised, which means things won't change. Like if you don't have a voice to begin with, how do you raise it to change things? It makes it hard for people to run for office. All these different barriers that we're trying to break down. But I also came out early on in my campaign to say I fully supported H.R. 1 at the federal level that would get dark money out of politics, provide transparency for donations. I believe that campaigns should be publicly funded, and these super PACs need to go. And so I'm dealing with, again, the Mitch McConnell playbook in this Democratic primary, where the person that everyone initially assumed was going to run away with it because of all the money is doing everything that allows this problem to just keep on going. And so that's key to me. And also in just protecting the integrity of our elections, making sure that we have paper ballots and that we have that trail to be able to track and make sure that everybody's voice gets heard. During the pandemic, I put out a memo on March 24th with a couple of things that were critical for me. And one of them was universal mail-in voting. It's hard to vote in Kentucky, man. And we need to make it much more accessible to everybody. We need to lower the age for folks to run for office. But this mail-in ballot thing was a big deal for me, especially seeing Senate Bill 2 at the state level, the voter ID bill, which I raised all types of hell against because we know our history, poll taxes, felony disenfranchisement, black codes, making it hard for people to have any agency. And I actually stood on the House floor and held up a cup of peanuts and asked the speaker if he was able to guess the number of peanuts in this cup to vote, could he do it? And that's the type of stuff my granddad went through. And so, I mean, this fight is real, man. And people ask me what's like the first thing I want to focus on when I get to Washington. It's the first thing I focused on when I went to Frankfurt. The very first bill I filed, even before I took my oath, I got my certificate of election, so I knew I could start drafting legislation. It was for restoration. Like, I want to break down barriers to democracy. And so the first thing I'm doing in Washington is immediately joining on to the tenets of H.R. 1 from the Senate side so that we can have more voices heard.
And Charles is so good. He's answering questions that I had way over here.
I got you,
we're
man.
over here. So
it's all interconnected.
I'm just saying. So we've got a few crises we're dealing with in this country. One of them is student debt. It's just a massive amount.
Yeah.
So what's the fix for that?
Yeah, student debt is criminal. Look right at you and say that it's criminal. It is not designed in a way that regular people could remotely pay it off. Like I said earlier, like my wife and I have student loans, and we have just concluded that we're not going to pay it off. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to Washington and cancel this student debt because there's so many people that are blocked from getting a home, blocked from starting a business, because of the incredible mounting student debt. You can't discharge it. It weighs on like my generation, and I got girls that are going to be advancing their education and have a way they see fit, and I want to make sure that I can help them do it. A college degree, we know this, and it's actually like the numbers are old, is the equivalent of a high school diploma. And if you are not able to advance your education, whether it's through a certification with the trade or advanced degree, you're going to have a hard time in this country. And that is why I believe that public college should be free. Same way we have our public school system, which we got to do a lot of work in. And so, I think it's an important point in this primary because I'm running against Democrats that don't agree with that, that have actually said that college shouldn't be free. Why would you ever suggest that college, which we know everybody needs, shouldn't be available to everybody? I've lived it, so I guess it's easier for me to see it, but I'm definitely fighting for that in Washington, and I know a lot of the presidential candidates were elevating that, canceling that. You see some of that in the COVID-19 relief where they're canceling portions of it because they know it needs to go. They know it ain't right, and I'm gonna go to Washington and fight like hell for it.
Now, the answer to some of those questions is the money that's in politics and that influences people. Some of these people, I don't know where they actually stand on their own. Yeah. And we probably never will, but we know who pays them and therefore how they stand based on that. So two-part question here. First part is kind of how do we get that money out of politics? And then also, this is a new question I'm asking people just based on some of my observations, but the system is strong. Once you get elected, outsiders like you, they try to pressure you into falling in line right immediately, and we've seen this even with some of the politicians I like. I've watched like the Squad. I've watched them change over the last year. They go about things differently now, and that's pressure from Pelosi and pressure from the party. So how do you fight that? How do we get the money out, and then how will you fight that pressure that you're going to get once you get in office? Yeah,
both your points are exactly right, which made it really easy for me to not run for re-election to the state house. It's not my seat, and I don't want to stay in to the point where I lose why I went. It's enticing when people get power and the ability to make decisions that they forget that that's not their power. Like, that is not theirs. And as far as getting the money out of politics, that's why I support public financing. Anybody in the country should be able to have an equal say. And then we need to get dark money out of politics. The way we're going to ultimately do that is by electing people that will commit to that. And I'm telling you, when you come from the struggle, when you know what it's like to make $3 stretch till Friday, you know what's really important. And I'm running on this platform to say I can't be bought because people have died that I care a lot about. And if I play those games, I'm a part of the problem, which is why I ran in a Democratic primary a couple years back against a longtime incumbent that I have a lot of respect for, because this isn't about party. It's not about political aspirations for me. And I think that, once we have people in office, regular folks that will push back, make these commitments and not take that big money, we start to whittle down that authority and elevate people over money, which is why we need to win this race. We need to beat big money in this primary and in this general and make it clear that the most important factor is people. And in terms of how do you weather the system, because it's a system, man. The stuff you see on TV, the TV shows, as an elected official, I would tell you, like, there's a lot of truth to the political games that you see on the outside looking in. It's crazy. It's the twilight zone. And if you stay in there too long, you will become a part of the machine. Mm-hmm. Like, it is by design. It protects and preserves itself. And like you said, if you come in looking to change things up, they want to either crush you quick or marginalize you and put you in a box where they can ignore you. And the way that I've pushed back on that is by continuing to engage people that disagree with me and like having hard conversations and not backing down and leading with a whole lot of love. That's why when people say, well, how do you run on a platform like you're running on in Kentucky? Well, I listen to the people of Kentucky. Pull the politics back. Everybody wants a Green New Deal if you don't call it that. Same thing with expanding healthcare. Why? No one is like, no, you shouldn't have healthcare. When you peel it back, now there's some, and that's okay, we still love them, but the majority of folks get it when you sit down with them and treat them like human beings. And so I want to create a process of complete accountability. I want the district offices to become more like community centers where folks can strategize, create agendas, and we can have constant follow-up and follow-through. And when I'm not doing everything I need to be doing, folks need to be able to call me out and hold me to account. I've done a lot of organizing, and I understand you need people inside at the table to help change things, but you also need folks on the outside that are helping to disrupt and make noise, and both of us together can break those walls down. And understanding that relationship gives me the chance to say, okay, if you're organizing in the streets and you see that I'm not pushing the way you want me to push, you need to light me up for that and let me work with you on ways to make that better. So I'm mindful of it, man, and it's not gonna be easy. I didn't run for re-election. Understand I won my seat by about close to 80%. And I knew that if I ran for re-election, because of all the work that I'd done, I probably wouldn't have been challenged. But it was an easy decision for me because I know this isn't about me building a career. 6 years is a long time. Like our generation, we're not of my parents where you work for one job for 25, 30 years, right, getting paid essentially the same thing. And then once you're done, you're trying to figure out how to survive after that. Like we're much more interconnected, we're much more global. And so we look at the economy differently. And to me, there's no reason to be in the United States Senate longer than 6 years. Like 6 years is a long time. And so that's my goal going in. I want to kick the door open and then you all can run in and we keep bending this arc.
Nice. Well, we're coming down the stretch. You still good on time? Got a couple more?
Yeah, and I know I gotta run. I'm going to show up at a couple demonstrations.
All right, we'll try to keep these last ones here a little bit quicker.
All right.
So we're in this right to work state. Yeah. Despite that, I am a dues paying union member.
Yeah.
So talk to my union brothers and sisters about what they can expect from you if you get in office.
The same damn thing you saw from me. If there's a picket, you know where I'm going to be at. I'm going to be on those front lines. It was a privilege of mine to co-sponsor legislation to repeal right to work. I want to support the PRO Act at the federal level. It needs to be easier and more accessible for folks to unionize. And I know that's critical to how we raise wages, how do we protect workers, how do we ensure and demand civil rights. And because of my work, I've been able to get support from organized labor even now with the big money candidate and the DSCC trying to bully folks out of supporting me. they've stepped up and said, nah, we're gonna support Charles because we know where he stands. He's gonna fight for workers' rights. He's gonna make sure the National Labor Relations Board has working people on it because he gives a damn about us. And I commit to you on that. I know that's gonna uplift our Commonwealth. I'm going there to raise some hell for you.
All right. Well, where do you stand on reproductive rights?
I fully support the Agency of Women, man. And that's been a very tough issue for Kentucky because it's been turned into this wedge issue here and nationally. And folks that understand the truth are afraid that if they speak up, they're either going to lose their position or they're going to be marginalized or hurt. And I've been one of the few men every time an issue came up to ban abortion or make it harder for women to get access to health care, maternal care. I was co-sponsor on the Maternal Care Act, supported the act, the legislation to make it more accessible for folks to get, women to get access to midwives, to get more care specific to them, especially for women of color who are disproportionately impacted by the shortcomings in our healthcare system. Their pain isn't treated the same way as others, and so I was one of those few guys that would stand up on the House floor and call it out and even lean into my faith and say that women deserve to have a voice in the issues that only affect them. And all these men that are getting all this passion and talking about an issue that affects women as if they are not in the room are a part of the problem. Like maternal health care, women's rights are human rights. And I've worked a lot with Planned Parenthood. As a state legislator, I'm going to continue that work at the federal level.
All right, we'll do these last couple just kind of quick hitter type so you can get where you need to be. Guns and gun control.
We need common sense gun safety. I'm a Mom's the Man gun sense candidate. We can protect rights and keep people safe.
LGBTQ fairness.
I support comprehensive fairness. I co-sponsor the legislation for statewide fairness in Kentucky. We need to make sure folks aren't being discriminated against because of the pronoun they use, who they love, or what they look like. I'm honoring your humanity, and I will fight for that in Washington.
And last one. This one isn't even one of your policies, but this is my other of my big two, so no candidate gets away without answering this. Net neutrality, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a big issue. I think that our rights and our privacy need to be protected. In this age where everything is digital, it's easy for your identity to be stolen, for your information to be taken, and we need to protect our rights and our privacy, and I'm going to fight for that.
And would that be under Title II?
Absolutely.
Awesome, that's what we need. If
Absolutely.
It's not under Title II, it's not net neutrality.
Absolutely.
So we'll wrap it up with this. I'll give you the camera here. Just tell the people of the state why they need to vote for you, and then when you're done, let them know how they can follow your campaign online.
Well, I'm asking for your vote because I really do believe that if we stand together, I know if we stand together, not only can we beat Mitch McConnell, but we can transform our future. That's our responsibility right now. We see the injustice, we see the inequity, we see the poverty, and we know that Mitch McConnell's at the core of a lot of it, profiting from it. This is not a time for taking baby steps or ignoring our challenges. We need someone that has done the work, that knows how to build coalitions, urban and rural, all across the Commonwealth, and will build the coalition that says every single person is critically important. That's who I am. That's what I believe in, and that's why we're going to win. And I need your help to do it. If you go to booker4kentucky.com, spelled all the way out, you can become an ambassador. You can organize from your couch wherever you feel comfortable, and you can know that you're voting for somebody, not just against somebody terrible. And I just want to thank you and lift you and honor your humanity. And thank you for hearing me out today. And thank you for the chance.
Charles Booker, everyone. Make sure you get out and vote. Support this
June
man.
23rd, make sure you vote. You can do absentee ballots. I didn't mention that. That was a big win for us to have no excuse absentee ballots. So make sure you utilize that. GoVoteKY.com. You can request your ballot up until June 16th. So by the 15th, you got to do it. And if you need help, go to booker4kentucky.com and we'll make sure you have all the info you need.
It's actually an easy process. I literally just dropped my ballot off in the mailbox on the way here. Got you circled in on there. So easy process. Took about 2 weeks for everything to come to me. So Get on that today. That way you got time before the 23rd. Again, thanks for watching, everybody. Share this out. Spread the message. And you all know what to do with this channel. Smash all those appropriate buttons. Like, follow, subscribe. You know what to do. And remember, always, always think critically.